بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله وكفى وسلام على عباده الذين اصطفى أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في القرآن المجيد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الدين عند الله الإسلام وما اختلف الذين أوتوا الكتاب إلا من بعد ما جاءهم العلم بغيا بينهم ومن يكفر بآيات الله فإن الله سريع الحساب صدق الله العظيم. Respected friends, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings be upon all of us and all of you. And good evening. I thank the Loyola University MSA for inviting me to share this evening with you and to speak about a topic that is definitely something that is very relevant to our lives in the United States these days. And it's something which is in the minds of every individual, Muslim, non-Muslim, people who know Muslims, people who don't, young and old. And there is so much confusion about what Islam is about and what's the essence of Islam. And on top of that, with the political climate and incidents that, unfortunately, random incidents that happen here and there, they have just made things much worse and made the waters more murky for someone who's trying to find the truth, for someone who's trying to understand what Islam is all about. Because there is so much misunderstanding, miscommunication, and then on top of that, an effort to, through the media and architects of propaganda, to distort the already weak image of Islam and put seeds of animosity, hatred, fear into the hearts of fellow citizens. So it's something that we as students at this university, as a student of knowledge myself, as a imam in a masjid, as an instructor, I feel that this is something really important, a duty for all of us on whatever side of the aisle we're sitting on, to be able to explain what our faith is about and for others to reach out and try to understand before we pass judgments. It's not correct for anyone, regardless of what faith or culture or background they come from, to pass judgments, to generalize about a community or about a faith group, especially when we have no idea what's the reality all about. We are such a educated community here. Chicago boasts the best of universities and has the best hospitals and a whole line of beautiful things that our city has. And we are in the age of new phones. I just got this today, the G2, right? So fast internet and latest gadgets and technology that you and I all enjoy. As much as I resisted getting a data plan, but then, I had to also, unfortunately, fall for that and get it. So we're so connected, and we are constantly getting in updates. It's interesting because some of my friends, and sometimes with my brother, we sit there and, as soon as you just got the phone or you got the internet and something pops up, like a unfortunate bomb blast or an earthquake or a political upheaval somewhere, and we start talking about it. And then after a while, then we tell each other, because we obviously aren't doing our homework or we aren't taking care of something else, and we're like, oh, nice meeting you, Ambassador, let's get back to work. Because this is, we're sitting there as if though discussing international politics, as if though we're actually ambassadors of that country, discussing some very important things. But in reality, probably more important work to do right now at this moment. But to say is that how well connected we are, that no sooner as a protester, burning himself, unfortunately, or a police officer in some country abusing a certain person, we have YouTube giving us the information in the next minute or two, right? We have it right in the United States. All kinds of stuff get caught and immediately put on YouTube. So we're so connected and we're so educated, but you see, the problem is that this leads us to, unfortunately, a bigger problem. And that is, we are getting only one certain type of information and a certain filter type of information. And the worst issue and the fallout of that is that we think we are educated. And we think we have a very broad knowledge of issues just because I know that there was a revolution in Egypt does not mean I have any idea what the climate and was of Egypt before and after, what exactly the history of this whole revolution is, what happened in this past 50 years, what has been the connection of our government with the regime, right? That doesn't mean anything. Just because I know that this happened doesn't mean I know anything that's going on in the background. And so because of this internet age and this age of information, we are under this falsely presumed idea and notion that we are very knowledgeable about other people, about other countries, when in reality we just know keywords. If I come up here and I throw out a few words of computer science, doesn't mean I even know how to turn on the computer. I've read it, I've heard it on the news, and I'm just repeating it, as I heard it. It doesn't mean I know anything. I could possibly fool some of you to think that I know something about this just because I'm using a few words. So we are actually, I think first we need to realize that we are not a very educated community. We know if we are a biology major, yes, you know biology. But other than that, I mean, this is, just ask your friends. I was in class in a graduate, my last class of my undergrad education, and I was talking about Dubai. Now, how many of you know where Dubai is? Or how many of you have heard of Dubai? Raise your hand. Well, evidently, these people in my class never heard of Dubai. They never heard of United Arab Emirates, right? And I was like, whoa, forget about the Middle Eastern part of it. This country boasts, the tallest building in the world. It has one of the everything biggest and tallest and most expensive and most glittery. So from purely capitalistic and materialistic viewpoint and reasons, most definitely you should know this place. Okay, you don't have to know if the rulers are Muslim or Arab, but definitely it's a party place, right? Know that. But no, we don't know that. So what's happening is that we hear keywords, and we watch on TV, and then we think we know about it when we don't know anything. What we call in Arabic, what they call jahl murakkab. When a person doesn't know something and he thinks he knows everything. And that is the most detrimental type of ignorance. You know what I mean? That's like when when a little kid is sick and his nose is running and he's got everything messed up, right? He's got a cold and he doesn't want to even wear a jacket. He says, no, it's warm. This is fine. It's natural. It's all natural. I'm completely okay. I don't need medicine. I don't need antibiotics. I don't need Tylenol. I'm completely fine. And you're like, okay, this is a serious problem. If you were having all these issues and you knew you were sick and you're coming to a physician, to a doctor, it's fine. It's like a state of denial. When people have diagnosed with cancer, like, no. I mean, I've met certain people with that. They've been diagnosed with a certain terrible terminal illness. And I'm sure you know people of that sort. Because of the shock of the whole thing, they refuse to accept that they have that problem. And that just leads to compounding the problem. Because they're not going to go see a physician. They're not going to go to the hospital. So here in the United States, even as connected as this group of individuals are with the internet, unfortunately, the type of information that we're getting through Facebook, maybe the Facebook pages that we ascribe to or subscribe to, or the Fox television or whatnot, we're getting a very narrow view. Just like any other country in the world, a non-democratic country that controls the media, yes, they have 24/7 television, but it's a certain view. I'm not saying the Middle East has all open views. Absolutely not. There are countries where most definitely what you see on TV is completely regulated by the government. A sermon cannot take place in any mosque or any masjid without it being pre-approved by the government. We know that. That's there. Does that mean that's right? Absolutely not. So here in this country, if we're thinking that everything is completely free and we have complete knowledge of everything, that's a problem. Because the people over there, they know they're not free. They know that the version they see on TV and listen on the radio is completely controlled by the government, and they're only seeing and hearing what the government wants them to hear. We as Americans, unfortunately, don't get that. We think that we have complete freedom and we are the most knowledgeable people and that we know exactly what's happening. You understand what I'm saying? This is a very basic thing. This is not about Shariah. This is about just general things of the world. General things of the world. We don't know where countries are in Africa. Where Johannesburg is. Just because of the World Cup, some of us now found out. But many times been asked, Johannesburg doing a study, where is that? What part of the world is that? Okay? So whatever we all know about Sharia and about Islam, unfortunately we're getting it from a filter. That's what I'm getting to. I've attended college all these years dressed like this. And all praise to Allah and alhamdulillah, definitely this place is home and the people are beautiful, and no one has ever said anything to me, criticized me for the way I dress, or even asked me. Once in a great while someone may ask, but overall people are very accepting and very nice, and of course this is home, this is where I was born and grew up and studied here as well. But I remember once, I was very shocked, and it's like 3-4 years ago. This is the only incident that happened to me when I was in campus. Is that it was the last day of the semester, and I was going to the class to write my final exam, and there was this girl who sat in the seat in front of me in class the whole semester. It was U.S. history, so we had a lot of discussions about, political discussions, and I'm vocal with my views, respectful to everyone, but my view may be not necessarily the most orthodox view. Right? But I had to sometimes offer my second opinions on certain things. And this girl who never talked to me the whole year, she came up to me, basically caught up to me and said, "Hey." I said, "Hey, what's up?" So I thought she just wanted to know how the final exam's going. Are you prepared? And wanted to discuss some notes. I said, "How's it going?" She said, "Yeah, it's all right. I want to say something to you." I was like, "Yeah, go ahead." So she's like, "Why are you here?" It's final exam day. That's why I'm here. Right? I'm not going to miss this day. I've never missed a class the whole year. Why would I want to miss, the last day? No, why are you here in America? I was like, because I was born here. I was born like 10 minutes from school. I've lived all my life over here. Well, she says, "Why do you live here and why do you stay here when you hate us so much?" Hate us? What do you mean us? You, the students of this community college? I don't hate any of you. What have I done? No, but you hate Americans. I said, "Well, were you read on a blog? Where did I write this? Where did I write that Azeemuddin hates you or Emily or Jennifer or Matthew or whatever? Where did I write that?" She's like, "No, I've read all about you all." I was like, "Oh, where did you see that?" She said, I've heard on the news and I've read all about you, and it says you guys are just bloodthirsty people who hate us, who want to kill us, and I've read about your prophet, who was and went on a barrage of insults and of course not so nice things, and I just want to know, why don't you just go back to where you came from? And so I was really dumbfounded. I hadn't know how to respond to her, because this is seemingly nice person who sat in class with me the whole semester, didn't open her mouth to say anything. And I was walking to the final exam. She wants to, say this to me, which obviously probably made me forget half of my notes. And I said, this is not the time to ask this thing. If you had it, we could have a healthy discussion about this earlier on in the semester. But all I can say is that you're just another victim of the propaganda machine. That's all it is. You are just proving the point that the media in our country, unfortunately, has done a very good job in putting seeds of hatred and doubt into simpletons like yourself. You know what I mean? I didn't say she would get more mad, but that's what she is. That's what she is. It's just people. They're not looking to go out of their way to go search the true answers. They sit there and just eat their potato chips and just watch, right? Nibble on some things and just listen to what they've got to say. But so this is exactly what the climate we're in right now. Okay? And so it's very difficult for me, if you give me an hour or two, to sit there and erase and wipe away hours, hundreds of hours of information that has been instilled into our minds through the internet and through the media. How can I in 45 minutes to an hour do that? It's very difficult. So what I'm going to say is, for someone who has actually come here willing to learn, who doesn't got blinders on, and who is sitting here with an open mind and heart, regardless of whether they're Muslim or not, trying to come and learn. Say, all right, what's this whole issue? Because if we've come here with a certain mindset that yes, these people are all definitely the most evil people, or Sharia is definitely something that is a threat to us, then I'm already telling you right now, you're not going to learn anything. You might as well just leave right now. Because my 45 minutes is not going to help you at all. I can't help someone who's already made a decision, who's already set in their ways. But definitely someone who's trying to learn, yes, hopefully Allah will inspire me to say things which will be beneficial for us to understand. The word itself, Sharia. Well, actually, before I move forward anywhere, let me say this. Or for that matter, anyone I have ever met, my friends, my relatives, my congregants in the mosque, in the masjid where I lead, and the tens of places that I have traveled throughout this country giving sermons and khutbahs and lectures at universities and masjids and Islamic centers, I have yet to meet, a group of individuals who are supposedly planning a takeover of this country and to establish Shariah law, whatever that's supposed to mean. I'm going to get into Shariah and Shariah law eventually, but I want to say this. The fact that there are certain elements within our population that are trying to ban Shariah law, and have actually, I think so, passed a bill in Oklahoma, and are trying to pass it or have already passed it in 13 other states, to ban Shariah law, it's a big joke. I have a good laugh. I really have a good laugh, like, oh my God, you're actually more smart and more well thought out than any of the Muslims. We Muslims can't get together and have a little prayer area in our university. We can't get together and have a little potluck dinner. It's difficult for us to organize. And we are sitting here and organizing a takeover of this government and throwing, no, I'm serious, it is so preposterous. It's not even worthy of me to actually speak on this topic. I should come here and crack jokes right now. Because it's just so foolish. It is so foolish. I'm not sitting here and deceiving anyone. Any of you Muslims who've traveled around, I ask any of you to raise your hand and say, yes, I have actually met this group of people on campus or in certain little dungeon mosques that you visit, where there's a group of people, even three people, that's enough, right, to be called a group, of three people who are trying their level best to establish Sharia and are lobbying, are collecting money, donations, started a political group, are writing letters to congressmen, bribing or maybe planning to kidnap a congressman or a senator to pass a bill, right? Bring that up, show it to people, because I have never yet come across anyone. The only people who are these are loonies. Loonies who do stupid things, who claim to be Muslims when they're not, or who are some sect that doesn't even belong to Islam, don't even look like Muslims, don't act like Muslims, and then they end up trying to, do something real foolish and make a fool out of themselves, aren't able to do anything. So Sharia law, establishing of Sharia law in this country, that's just a big joke. We should just put it on jokes.com, right? And then plug in the usual, you know what I mean? Usual backgrounds of people who are made fun of, and it'll be a nice joke. Because seriously, it's just so far away from the truth. Muslims that have immigrated to this country, there are many, many thousands of Muslims. I think if almost 40% of Muslims are African Americans. I could be off, but about 40%. That's a huge number. They are as indigenous as any of us other groups are in this country and been here, for a very long time. But the other immigrant community that has come here, ask how many of them, any of them, ask my parents, ask my uncles, ask my friends, how many of you have come to this country to establish Sharia or Islamic law? You won't even find one. Okay? Everyone is actually worried about the same things that you all are coming and paying your $70,000 or $50,000 tuition to Loyola. Is you want to basically be able to get bread on your table in the next 5 years. Get married, have a family or whatever, live your life and be able to provide for yourself and your family. That's it. That's the motivation for thousands and millions of people, Muslims, who have immigrated to this country. That's it. And right today, if you were to go to Egypt, or go to Tunisia, go to even Saudi, go anywhere, and you say that here's a free ticket to America, and you can go and start up a business there. If you will have millions of people lining up. You won't believe that, but that's the exact true nature of things. People want to have a nice life, want to be able to pay for their children's education, want to get their children married, want to have a nice, comfortable life, and want peace. You see a few wackos doing stuff, and that's what the media broadcasts. Now, I'm not saying something from my little, shell that I live in. Alhamdulillah, I've traveled to 6 continents. And I have repeatedly traveled 2-3 times a year out and then within the country. And I've gotten a chance to meet students and people from all over the world. The institute that I studied in had students from 55 countries. 55 countries. From all different backgrounds, from all different ethnicities. And so you talk and you discuss. And it's at the end of the day the same hierarchy of needs, basically. That brings us all together. And that unites us as human beings who are trying to fulfill our basic needs. So I want us to understand that Super Bowl Sunday, if you are all watching, well, the rest of us also, who are interested in football, were watching. Majority of us. The largest number of, I think, we're watching this time, right? This past Sunday? I think so. what was it, over 100 million? If you're worried about not finding a job after graduation, these Muslim students here are worried about the same thing. If you're worried about your younger brother and younger sister getting caught up with the wrong group and going on drugs, these Muslims right here are worried about the same thing. Whatever issues that are relevant to you are almost identically relevant to your fellow Muslims, your fellow citizens, your fellow classmates. It really is. And one Christian person I met made a nice observation. She had visited one of our mosques and said, I looked at your bulletin board and I saw such a resemblance to our churches. It's someone offering their nanny services, someone looking for a nanny, someone is saying they're looking for a roommate to dorm with. The basic simple needs of a community are reflected in a church, are reflected in a masjid, and are reflected in a mosque, reflected in a synagogue. Communities trying to just get along and just get through the day, get through the year, get through their lives in peace. That's the first thing I wanted to mention, that whatever I'm going to say now, that by no means doesn't mean we're trying to establish something. I'm speaking here to explain from an academic view, from an academic standpoint, what Sharia is. But at the end of the day, this is just I don't think of any of this as a dream. This is just something that the media has promoted and sparked a debate when there's not a single group that I know of that is trying anything, even remotely close to establishing any type of Islamic law within this country. Sharia itself, the first thing that comes to our mind is obviously the penal code. And specifically, honor killings and stoning people to death and chopping people's hands off. I was speaking to a group of Catholic school students from high school just last week. And so that's exactly what I told them. I said, how many of you think Sharia is a desirable thing and that it should be established in America? Raise your hands, right? And everyone's like, okay. I said, how many of you think it's something negative? And they weren't willing to. I said, no, I know, all of you. All of you. And I told them that if I did not educate myself about Islam, if I hadn't gone and studied where I studied, I'd sat in the company of scholars of Islam, I would I would share the exact same feelings as any one of you. That's what I told them. Because the idea that I understand of Sharia that's exactly what I said. It's just a completely barbaric, archaic way of killing people. That's all Sharia is about. Sharia is a systematic way of how you can torture and kill people, right? And it's just the worst thing to live under. You'd rather just shoot yourself in the head nicely and die, through suicide, than live under Sharia. Because that's what the idea I get if I switch on the TV or listen to the news. And I share the sentiment. If I wasn't educated in this way, I would have thought like you exact same way. Trust me. If I'm at a coffee shop or at a doctor's office or in the gym and the television's on, the Fox especially, almost every single time it happens that it's something about Muslims, and of course 110% of the time it's negative, I cringe. I was like, I just wish I could just sink into the earth right now, and so people don't see me like, oh my God, they're talking about him. They're talking about him, And so that's like, you have no idea how that feels. You have no idea how it feels, and that's what I told these students last week. I said it's easy for us sitting in Chicago into this school, attending this amazing private school, through scholarship or through our own tuition, paying $40,000, $50,000, attending this beautiful private school, and to say, yeah, I know what Chicago is about. Yeah, I know what the poverty in Chicago is. Do we have any idea that the African American community in the city of Chicago, the mortality rate is almost equal to that of third world countries? Third world countries, mortality rate. Right here, in the city of beautiful Chicago. Right here, a few miles away. And the difficulty that they live through. But it's difficult. How many of us can relate to that? We're in the city of Chicago. We live maybe 2-3 miles away from them, 5 miles away from that community. Hyde Park isn't too far away. I wonder how the residents of Hyde Park really understand, what their neighbors are going through. So for us to say that we understand what Muslims are going through, absolutely not. You don't. You have no idea. They sit next to you in class, but you have no idea what it goes through to see the negativity that is propelled and thrown against us. When I have a person sitting next to me, I come and sit in a flight, and a guy says, you know what, I'm sorry, I can't sit next to you, and stands up and goes to another seat. That's really, really hurtful. Because what did I do to that person? You know? But dirty looks, of course, insults, it's a normal thing. We've gotten used to it now, to a certain extent. But once in a while, it breaks through the threshold and it hurts us. It doesn't make me angry, it kind of hurts me. Because I feel that, what have we done to make these people think about us like that? And I feel sorry and guilty that I can't do something, that I can't go and do something to clarify that. All I do is I smile back, regardless of what happens. Or maybe he'll remember that smile and won't think of me, you know, in the way that he thinks. So Shariah, to translate that as, what's the first word that comes to mind? Islamic law, right? Right? So that itself is a very wrong, or at least I should say a very simplistic translation that does disservice to the word Sharia. It's much more. Okay, what is law? What is law? That itself is so vague. And then you have all sorts of laws pertaining to all sorts of things in all sorts of countries. But then to add the word Islamic on it, what is that supposed to mean? It just adds confusion to a word that's already confusing. Law is pretty ambiguous. You add Islamic to that, it makes it more ambiguous. It doesn't help us. So Sharia, first let's look at the etymology and the background of this word. Sharia comes from shara', which is a path. Shari' is a path. Specifically, a path that leads to a water hole. Shara' is a water hole wherein people or animals gather and drink. You know, you've seen documentaries of Africa, right? At least. So, Discovery Channel. So where people come and the animals come and they all of them get together and they share water. It's the central focal point of the animals of the jungle or of the desert. So Sharia is that. It's this water hole where animals or human beings go for water. As well as the path that leads to that. So in essence, Sharia is a path that has already been treaded upon, walked upon, because everyone needs water. So it's not something that's new. People are walking, animals are walking on it. It's well understood, it's well defined. It's not confusing, because if you get confused every day to get water, you'll end up dying. Right? So it's very clear. And you walk towards it, and it will actually not take you to a dead end, but it will actually take you to the water hole. And it will provide you with something that will quench your thirst and purify you of your dirtiness and impurities. So I've mentioned a lot of subtleties here, and a lot of parallels. So Sharia, the Islamic way of living a life, if you look back at the etymology of this word, it means that it's a complete code of life. Directions, instructions, rules, principles, laws that provide a framework through which a person can lead his life or her life, and takes a person to the actual goal of his or her life, providing them with clear, clean water, without which they cannot live for a day. And this Sharia way of life not only purifies them from the impurities that they have gained through their social interaction and their mundane daily lives, but also quenches the thirst of finding solace and purpose in life. Did we get that? So, Sharia simply is not a Islamic law. That's what we're saying. It is not something as simple as translating that as Islamic law. I'll explain to this again. The Sharia is the path. It refers to the path that leads to a water hole, a path that is treaded upon repeatedly. It's well defined. So it is a set of laws, yes, a set of actions, ways, culture, ideas that make it easy for a person. Make it easy, not difficult. Make it easy for a person to reach to something that he is cannot live without. That is Allah. That is ethics, morals, peace, good character, all of those things, without which he cannot live with. Sharia provides a framework to reach into that place and gives him something through which he can clean out his heart, the impurities that come within the heart, on the body. All of that is embodied in Sharia. It is not the idea behind Sharia to cause injustice, to kill people, to hurt people. Absolutely not. As we said, penal code, right? Penal law is a very small section of this huge framework of regulations, rules, and laws of Sharia. So we have three things here. We have an obligation component, a value component, and a virtue component. The obligation component is the path. Sharia gives us the meaning of the path. That this is the traveling on this path that we all have to travel on, and it's not something new. Every one of us is walking on it. Then the value component. It's the water. The water is a value, and that's why we are walking on this path in order to get to that water. And it's something that our predecessors have walked upon as well. And lastly is the virtue component, which is the purity that the water promises for the thirsty traveler. That a human being who is walking in the Sharia wants not to cause havoc and chaos in the world, but wants to gain peace within himself and provide a peaceful environment to those who are around him. That is the direct, I'm giving you a description of what you will find in, for example, in Taj al-Urus or Lisan al-Arab, the classical Arabic dictionaries, a very abridged and version of that in my own words. But if you look it up in the dictionary, that's exactly what you'll find. And much more than this. Having said that, we can at least now realize to equate Sharia with the hudud laws, or more graphically speaking, chopping and cutting and flogging, is a huge injustice to this way of life. Let's speak from the point of law. Sharia is not derived from only the Quran. It's derived from four sources: Quran, Hadith, Ijma' and Qiyas. These are the four sources of Sharia. Quran, the holy book of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, which we believe as not only a book of laws and rules and regulations, but also it's a spoken word of Allah. The protected spoken word of Allah. So that is something which cannot be amended or changed. Yes, the interpretation of that may differ. It may vary from person to person, from age to age. But it is the book of Allah, and what is said in there is set in stone. But interpretations, of course, change. So this is amazing. This is actually a huge gift of Allah. A huge gift from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala for us. That the verses can be understood in so many ways that it makes it applicable to every era. Now, when you look at the books that are written in science in the Quran, you see, after studying those things, whether you believe in the Quran as a holy book or not, that most definitely this is not a coincidence. There are some really interesting things going on here. From the number of times the sky is mentioned, to the number of times the earth is mentioned, to the number of times the ratio of mentioning men and women in the Quran, the ratio of night and day, all sorts of things. This is a whole science in itself. Right? There's a lot of books you can find on that. But what's so interesting is that this Quran was revealed to these nomadic, simpleton, very basic lifestyle that these Arabs had. It was revealed on them. And they were able to understand it, believe in it, and said, yes, this is a true word of God, true word of Allah. It applies to our lives. And that very same Quran today, as educated astronomy majors, educated biology majors, if we want to go search for the very simple Quran and search for signs that you are taught in school, whether about the eye or about the embryology, whatever aspect of science that you're looking for, you can go find that in the Quran. Not all aspects, of course, certain things. And I always say this, that this is your interpretation. And just if science changes tomorrow, it doesn't mean that the Quran is wrong, because you interpreted it that way in the first place. But the beauty of the Quran is that it can be interpreted by nomadic Arabs 1400 years ago, and can be interpreted as well in a very academic sense by you all. And it's open to that type of interpretation, which makes our life very easy. In this day of 2011, if we want to follow the Quran, we have our scholars of exegesis who can explain to us, or if we are ourselves students of the Quran, how to apply the Quran within our lives. We don't have to stand up and feel ashamed of the Quran, that, oh my God, what am I supposed to say? Everyone is saying that this is completely wrong. Someone has proven this and someone has proven that. What am I to say? Absolutely not. There's no reason for us to be ashamed about it. There isn't, because every era, the Quran is so flexible. That's what I'm trying to say. So that's the first source of law. Second source of law and Shariah, if using that term that we have gotten accustomed to translating it with, is the sayings and the teachings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So he was the first interpreter of the Quran as well. And some of his sayings are very explicit and clear, unambiguous, and some of them, they're a little vague. And that again, there's benefit for us. So that's why today, Muslims in Africa and Muslims in America are able to, in certain things, practice Islam a little bit differently. Our culture, the way we eat, the way we dress, whatnot, it's actually very, varies from place to place. And there's no set in stone way that this is the way or that's it. Of course, the basics are all the same, but there's different, colors that each culture has. And Islam accommodates that. Alhamdulillah, it accommodates that. It accommodates all of those things. Let's take an example of the Quran. Quran, for example, says, يا أيها الذين آمنوا إنما الخمر والميسر والأنصاب والأزلام رجس من عمل الشيطان فاجتنبوه لعلكم تفلحون. O believers, indeed, wine and alcohol and gambling and idols and gambling are رجس من عمل الشيطان. This is dirt and impurity from shaitan. فاجتنبوه, so stay far away from it so that you may become successful. So this has made it very clear. Okay, gambling is not permissible for us. Worshiping idols is not permissible for us. Drinking is not permissible for us. That's a rule. Now why is that? Because Allah has forbidden us. Allah has forbidden us. That's a law, a rule that's laid down. Is that the only type of law that Quran says? Absolutely not. The Quran in explicit detail, يوصيكم الله في أولادكم للذكر مثل حظ الأنثيين فإن كن نساء فوق اثنتين فلهن ثلث ما ترك. A lengthy 3 verses describes in detail how one's inheritance gets distributed. A very complex issue. A very complex issue. There's programs now, mathematical programs that you type in and you enter the information in. If you have a wife, if you have sons, if you have daughters, if you have brothers and sisters, if you have uncles and aunts, if you have grandchildren, each thing, it's like a formula. If you have one, then it affects the other. Sometimes if you have, for example, wife and children, the brothers and sisters, siblings won't get anything. Parents will get, so it's a whole complex science by itself, the distribution of inheritance. The Quran speaks about that in detail. Muslim personal law, civil law, how the divorce system works, how marriages work, how many divorces one is allowed to issue. Complete details of that are mentioned in the Quran. A very small portion of it, here and there, mention about the penal code, about what happens to someone who commits theft, or someone who commits adultery, and so forth. Small portions of that. But that's just a very small portion of the complete way of life. Now this is like someone who says, I hate democracy, or I hate the US Constitution, or I hate living in the United States. Okay, why do you hate the United States? Why do you hate the democracy of the United States and the Constitution? Well, because you can go up to 10 years in prison for selling drugs. So that's why I hate everything about this country. That's just nonsense. Makes no sense. If you have an issue with that law, fine. But how can you throw out a whole constitution, a whole way of life that we have in America because of one law that you differ with? You have a right to differ with it, fine. But if you get caught, good luck trying to explain to the judge that you differ with that law. You know? I don't think he'll be willing to accept any excuse from us. But what I'm saying is that you have a small section of the Islamic complete way of life and the law system that talks about these issues. But those are the very same things that we propel and make a big deal about. Fiqh is called jurisprudence. Fiqh, okay? Now, I have studied and I taught and I'm teaching currently books on fiqh. Or Shariah, you may call that. This is no secret. You go to the Loyola University's library and I'm sure they have a book of fiqh there. Open it up and you'll be surprised that the first chapter is not about chopping hands off. And nor is the second chapter, nor is the third, nor the fourth, or fifth, or sixth, or seventh, or eighth, or ninth, or 10th. You may find it in the detailed books, may have it as the last or second to last chapter. Because that's not what it's all about. Guess what the first chapter in all the books of fiqh is? Right. I told these guys, I said, it's about water and the types of water. And they're like, what? Types of water? Exactly. The types of water, what? Spring water and water of rivers, water of lakes, water melted from snow and ice and hail, right? Water of wells. You're like, what are you talking about? Well, in order to pray, we have to perform wudu or ablution. We have to wash ourselves. In order to wash yourself, you need water. In order for that prayer to be valid, your ablution needs to be valid. In order for the wudu or the ablution to be valid, the water's got to be at a certain standard of purity. So the very first thing that is in discussion is the purity of water. What types of water are there? What purifies it? The color, the smell, or the taste. If it changes in the water, it will make the water impure. If there's a whole bunch of leaves in the fall time and they change the color of the water, you put dye in the water, something fell into the water, a dead animal, so forth. All of those examples. That's exactly the first chapter, how it begins everywhere. And then you will go into the details of ablution. Then of taking a bath. Yes, the taking a bath. And of relieving oneself. And then of prayer. Chapters and chapters and chapters of prayer. What breaks prayer, what invalidates it, what makes it reprehensible, what makes what constitute in what instances do you have to make it up? In what instances do you have to add something to it in order to recompense for a mistake that you have done? What happens when you're traveling? What happens when you have just arrived back at home? What happens when you're in a state of impurity? On and on of so many dimensions of prayer. Then we go into fasting. In the month of Ramadan, outside of the month of Ramadan, what validates it, what invalidates it, what eye drops and ear drops and injections and IVs and kissing and anything of that sort. How does that affect your fasting? How do you make up a fast if you broke it by eating or something else? On and on and on. Then you get into zakat, alms. How do we calculate that? What are the amounts? Who can you give it? Very detailed. How do you give zakat on stocks? How do you give zakat on investments, on rental property? Is there anything or is there not anything? On jewelry, is there anything or not? How about diamond rings? How about platinum? All of those things are going to be discussed there. Then you go on to Hajj, the pilgrimage. Who has to go? Who doesn't have to go? What are the minimum requirements of going? What are the different ways that you can perform the Hajj? What invalidates it? What makes it reprehensible? What is the best way of doing it? On and on. Tons and tons of details of that. Then you lead up to these are the ibadat, acts of worship. Acts of worship. This is one whole section of religion called ibadat, acts of worship, rites of worship. You go into the next section, which is called mu'amalat, dealings, social dealings, financial transactions of all sorts. It all starts off with kitab al-nikah, the book of marriage. And what should a person look for in a spouse, and how a person proposes, how is a proposal accepted, what are things to look for in compatibility, and much detail in that. Who is allowed to get married to who you should consult, and then the unfortunate chapter of divorce. But even before divorce actually comes all the chapters that happen after marriage. What happens after marriage? Hopefully you get children, and then hopefully all the other stuff that happens. So about the details of having children, about the purity of childbirth, impurity, whatnot, details of even breastfeeding, what is permissible, what's not, how are relationships? Because in Islam, I'm throwing this out. In Islam, if a child under the age of 2.5 gets breastfed by a certain person, that now he becomes a child of, or a rada'a, what we call a child from rada'a, or a child through this relationship that has been built up, through the wet nurse, between the mother and the son. Right now, not that they will begin, nothing more than that, but it's just that they can't marry. She can't marry. The child now can no longer marry this lady's daughter, because now they've become brother and sister. Right? So all the details of that will come. Right? So, I mean, if I were to just start throwing out details of all of these things, it would be mind-boggling that, oh my God, how many things have been discussed. And that's exactly what Islamic law or Shariah is all about. The smallest, tiniest things. So that you are, every single moment of your life, in whatever situation you may be in, whether you are king of a huge democracy, or you are a king of, that's like an oxymoron. So, or you are a president, I should say, of a huge country, or you are a king of a dynasty, or you are a beggar on a street of some city. You know exactly what Islam is asking you to do. Every single situation. So I have, for example, my emails are come from a wide range of things. I got a text message today from someone whose friend, unfortunate, went to the hospital today and found out that they're pregnant with a child, but with a baby, but the baby has been, the doctor is saying has got the Down syndrome. So what to do in this case? Can they do an abortion or not? Then I got an email from a couple, a married couple. While the wife was away, the husband cheated, unfortunately, on her with her best friend. And so now what is, of course, definitely terrible, but no, this is the situation. Both have emailed me, and both, are asking what to do. You have another person who right now, while I was driving up here, a girl who says she's found the perfect match. The guy's I guess a bum. She says that. She's not very educated, not really, comes from a good family. She wants to get married. What does Islam say about me? How can I convince my parents? I don't need to even convince my parents. I need to get married to this guy. That's all. What does Islam's got to say about that? I have an issue of not being able to control myself in certain aspects, certain issues. What does Islam say about that? Right? Someone wants to buy a house through the bank. Is that permissible or not? What about late fees? Are you allowed to give on your mortgage late fees or not? What about leasing a car? Is that permissible or not? What's the whole background about that? I mean, the type of questions that we get on a daily basis are so wide in range and variety. And that just tells you how Sharia is a complete way of life that dictates and helps us live a beautiful life with our family, with our spouse, with home, at business, everywhere. So I'm not going to go through all the chapters of fiqh, but all I'm saying, at the very Hidayah, Al-Hidayah is written by Marghinani, 5th century scholar, book of law, a book of law that is taught at universities that I've studied. Only in the last and the 4th volume, towards the end of it, does the Kitab al-Hudud, or the book of a penal code or penal law, comes in. The very last. And we basically literally just skip through it. Some institutes don't even teach it. We do it for what they call it, for the sake of barakah, for blessing's sake. To say we've studied it. You get what I'm trying to say? That's it. We read through it. Because it doesn't apply. You cannot establish those things. You cannot pelt people or flog people when you don't have a proper Islamic government. You can't do any of those things. You cannot take the law in your own hand. That you saw someone taking drugs, so you throw them in the jail. You can't do that. You're not a police officer. Who are you to enforce the law? That's exactly with all of those laws that you and I are hearing about. In Nigeria, this is happening, that's happening there, this, that. My God, this is just so wrong. By people who have, unfortunately, no idea what they're doing. Interesting thing for many of us. Probably most of us don't know this. An adulterer or adulteress, like in this case of this guy. I saw some of you saying, oh my God, terrible. Exactly. It really is terrible, right? So that Islam does not want that to happen. Islam does not want that to happen. You've cheated on your wife, or the wife cheated on the husband, which happens also instances. This is just something which is not right. So yes, there is a system of punishing those perpetrators of such a sinful crime. But Islam looks at this, that you punish one. I'm an instructor too, right, of younger kids. This is how it is, man. You got 20 kids who have just drank like 2 cans of Red Bull before they came to school. And so they are so jittery and hyper, it's mind-boggling, it's so difficult to control them. But when someone, what are you going to do? What are you supposed to do? So you make an example out of one of them. You say, all right, why didn't you do your homework? You stand up. Or you leave the class if you're being disrespectful. And everyone's like, oh, okay. This is what, we can't do that. We got to hold back our emotions and our excitement. Islam wants peace and, the society at whole to live nicely. So that's why few people are unfortunately have to face, or fortunately, whatever, have to face the repercussions of what they do. That's it. So that is a deterrent. That is a deterrent. I mean, we haven't even, I'm just this is not even the tip of the iceberg of the topic. But let's look at the application of certain aspects of Sharia, not all of it, in certain countries. Hands-on. If you have traveled around the world, or if you have read about crime around the world, look at the CIA fact book. What is the safest place in the world when it comes to transporting money, when it comes to security of stores or banks? We live in a country that's got huge prisons that we spend sometimes more on a prisoner in our maximum security prison in the state of Illinois, possibly, don't quote me on this, but then we would spend on a child's education. Thousands, I don't know the numbers, but thousands of dollars in order to incarcerate a certain person. We have a huge law enforcement system in this country. Yet at the same time, we have banks left and right, being robbed. We have armored trucks being robbed. We have break-ins every single day. You're right around my own house. All kinds of stuff. All of those police officers and this and that. I think we had, last year the most murders of any of the cities of America. Somewhere around there. And we've got this huge law enforcement, police, the Chicago police armed with guns and whatnot. But we're not able, we have 700 was it? 700 murders? Somewhere around there. Okay, that's a lot of murders. In a country that's got the best guns, and it's got the best type of radios, and God knows what type of stuff these cops have. And then you have this barbaric, archaic, Stone Age people living in Saudi, who do not even carry a gun. No gun, no bat, nothing. I mean, I'm telling you, these guys got nothing. And some of them, unfortunately, I gotta say, some of these lower level cops, they're illiterate. They don't even know how to write a ticket. Seriously, they don't even know how to write a ticket. They just come there with their thing and you're like, okay, I'm moving, fine. And the guy can't even give you, he doesn't know how to write it. Right? Seriously. Some of them are so illiterate. But I visited there in December. And I was there, alhamdulillah, for Hajj. And I saw this every single day. The call of prayer goes on 5 times a day. Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, Isha, right? Everyone rushes. You got a guy who's got a Rolex store. You got a guy who's got a diamond store and whatnot right in front. And he'll just close the shutters. Sometimes he'll throw a white sheet to say basically it's closed for business. No sign, just throw a white sheet over, bed sheet. Say, I'm basically going for prayer. It's understood. Everyone's rushing for prayer. It's completely left open. Completely left open. You can transport millions of dollars from here to there, and you don't have to worry nothing. You can leave your wallet, you can leave your car, you can leave whatever. It's not going to be taken. Simple as that. Now you don't need the latest technology. You don't need guns. You don't need very complicated laptops in all the cops' cars. You don't need tasers and lasers. None of that. But most definitely, they have brought in social order. Now, how often? Is it every day that they're chopping off people's hands? Absolutely not. It's probably maybe once whoever is foolish enough to do that, but gets caught. This is not a poor man begging, or he was hungry and dying, he stole something. Obviously, the laws of Islam are not for that purpose. You have to provide him him a job. You wouldn't go sit there and Umar radiallahu anhu, the second Caliph, mentioned this. That if a person steals out of poverty and hunger, that's not a person whose hands you get cut off. Whose hands get cut off. So, all of these laws that are there, which even though they serve as a very small system, small part of the capital punishment, which is a very small part of the laws that pertain to financial transactions, to Islamic civil law, and on, are also applicable in very few instances. Now this is what I was saying that many of us probably don't know. The pelting and the execution of adulterers and adulteresses in Islam. I was teaching a very, very educated, an extremely educated, very knowledgeable American student who probably writes better than most professors and has an understanding that is very difficult to find right now amongst the student body. Understanding of politics, understanding of the English language, understanding of the history of the country and history of Chicago, whatnot. Very, very educated person. And I was teaching him a few chapters of fiqh. He wanted to know. So I was teaching him jurisprudence, and I taught him the chapter on capital punishment. And I can teach any of you, whoever's interested in doing that. But after studying that, this is his view. It's not me. I didn't tell him. I just taught him what the book says. And he said, wow, I am so impressed. I wish that people, before they start passing judgments about Shariah and about stoning people to death and stuff, actually come and look at the actual text, the Arabic text of the books of fiqh, of jurisprudence, to realize what a codified and complicated and a beautiful system of law this is, that has so many, checks and balances to make sure that a rightly elected or rightly chosen caliph also does not mishandle and misuse these laws to kill people or to hurt people. For example, in order for you all heard about the Nigeria case, right? Nigerian case, and there's a lady who's supposedly committed adultery, and right, and they're trying to stone her to death, or it's been taken, I don't know, 5 years, 6 years, right? Come on, guys, please. So it's for the past 5, 6 years, it's been, or even before that, it's such a huge thing. In order for to be proven in the court of law, in front of a Muslim judge, you know what type of proof you need to have in order for a person to be regarded as an adulterer or adulteress in the court of law and then face justice? Does anyone know? Yes. Four witnesses. Four witnesses see a man and a woman are holding hands? Are kissing? They actually have to see penetration. Yes. Penetration. 4 people. 4 people. How in the world is that possible? Unless you really, unless, whatever. Okay? So, 4 people. 4 people have to see. I said none of that. It's got to be penetration. And the Arabic word for that, dukhul, is mentioned. Kalmili fil mikhal. I won't go into the description of that, but it's a very explicit description in the text of law that talks about how that penetration has to be seen. Meaning it's got to be beyond a shadow of doubt that not... oh my God. So basically the various types of sex that are there, none of those count. It's just got to be the one type. You understand what I'm trying to say? It's got to be the one type and it's got to be witnessed by 4 people. So, now, having said that, let's look back at the life of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings upon him. During his era, during his lifetime, how many people were stoned to death on a daily basis because 4 people saw them committing adultery? Can anyone raise your hand? Say the answer. How many? Because people saw them? There's not a single incident. In the era of the Prophet, in the era of the rightly guided caliphs, or in the history and the annals of history of Islamic Muslim rulers, that anyone was ever put to death because of adultery because they were able to bring 4 witnesses who saw this. There were 2 or 3 people, especially 2 people, who faced justice and this penalty in the time of the Prophet. One was a lady, Imra'atul Ghamidiyya, and one was a man, Ma'iz. 2 different instances. And in both instances, what happened? They themselves came and begged the Prophet ﷺ that they should face justice. Here, they'd rather face the punishment of Allah on earth than face Him on the Day of Judgment. So look at this. The Prophet, we all have heard this in speeches and lectures, and in the text is there. It's in the authentic books of hadith, where the Both stories are very emotional. They really are so emotional, subhanAllah. Where the man comes to the Prophet, Ma'iz, and he comes to the Prophet and he says, Ya Rasulullah, purify me, tahirni. I fornicated. And the Prophet ﷺ, there are many narrations. They're very similar in nature. So I'm not saying specifically which one is of this two. It could be I'm taking parts of this or part of that, but they're very similar, right? So he says, I fornicated. And the Prophet ﷺ said, no, you didn't. لَعَلَّكَ قَبَّلْتَهَا. Maybe you kissed her. Kissing doesn't count. Please go away from here. That's what he was trying to say. Go away from here because I'm the last person who is your prophet, who's been sent as a mercy for the mankind, who wants to see one of my fellow people be killed for something that they have committed. Allah says, "An-Nabiyyu awla bil mu'minina min anfusihim." The Prophet is closer to you, not than your parents, closer to you than yourselves. You do not love yourself as much as your Prophet loves you all. You think he wants to see you dying for something you've slipped? We all know the love of our parents. Seriously, when we get sick, we're not as worried about ourselves as much as our parents are. Am I not right? We're like, yeah, whatever. It's a cut, fine. A broken bone, fine. But our parents are losing sleep and losing everything because they think we're hurt. When we actually are hurt. But we don't worry about it as much as they do. The Prophet has tens and tens of times more love for us than our own mothers. An example of that we've heard many times. The Prophet ﷺ heard about a young man who was dying. And he came to this young man and said to him, you're dying. Reiterate and repeat the kalima, La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, the words of testimony of faith towards Islam, so that your sins can be forgiven and so that as soon as you die you can go into paradise. Because you're basically repenting right before you pass away. And so the Prophet is instructing him to say, and his lips are sealed. He can't. He's not able to. And he keeps on saying, come on, say it! And he's not able to. So the Prophet began to think. Now he could have walked away. He said, go to hell. You don't want to say the kalima? You don't want to believe in me? Go to hell. No! But that's the impression we get, right? He was out there to throw all of us in hell. The Prophet Muhammad, ﷺ, peace and blessings be upon him, investigated and said, listen, I need to save this young man from the hellfire. And he said, do you have a mother? He says, yes. She alive? Yes. Where is she? Fine. He found out. He went to her and said, are you happy with your son? And she says, no, I'm not happy with my son. He's been very unkind to me and on and on. So the Prophet asked him, will you forgive her? Will you forgive him, please? Why? Because if you don't forgive him, what's going to happen? He's going to be deprived of saying the kalima, the words of La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah, and unfortunately he will have to face retribution for this in the hereafter. This is Shariah, this is law that tells us what the relationship between our mothers and us, and our fathers and us. Islamic law is telling us this. So she refused. This is what we talk about, the love of the father, the love of the Prophet versus the love of the mother. She's like, I don't care. I'm not going to forgive him. So the Prophet said, oh, is that so? Fine. Now the Prophet had to think quickly, improvise. I need to change this person's heart. I don't control his destiny. His mother does. His mother has to forgive him. I can't forgive him. His mother has to forgive him. Then he'll be able to say the kalima and Allah will forgive him. So he instructs some of his companions to construct a little bonfire. Bring pieces of wood and start up a fire. And then he brings that sick, dying son of hers and said, throw him in here. Obviously putting on a show. And she begs and says, stop, please, don't do this. Well, the Prophet ﷺ basically was telling her that if you do not forgive him, he is going to go into a fire that's 70 times more hot than this fire, a fire that will never perish, a body that will constantly burn forever. That's what you're putting your son into if you don't forgive him. And so she said, fine, I forgive him. And he was able to say the last shahada and he passed away with that. So that's the love of the Prophet. So when the Prophet heard this, he says, you probably kissed her. And he gave him 4 possibilities of different things, foreplay basically. and the Prophet said, you did this. And at last he said, did you do this? He said, no, Ya Rasulullah, I actually did this. I did this and nothing else. I've done it. And then the Prophet, with much difficulty then, ordered the punishment to be carried out. With the other incident where the lady came, she said, O Prophet, I fornicated. I committed adultery. What did the Prophet do? Turn his face away. She comes like this. 4 times he's turning her face away, and she keeps on saying, no, tahirni, purify me. Because the fear of God that they had, they would rather face this punishment here than face Allah on the Day of Judgment. And he said, no, please go from here, please. After 4 times, he said, fine. What's going to happen to the baby? Come back after the child is born. Now, was there probation officer standing outside her house? No. Was there a little tag on her legs? What do they call that? You know what I'm talking about. Well, you know, the thing that gives back the signals. Nothing, right? She could have walked away, she could have run away. He did not ask her. He never called her back. She herself came back with a child after she gave birth. On her own will. There's only 2 incidents that took place. And remember, I already mentioned to you one. There's other one's called Imra'atul Ghamidiyya, the wife of Ghamidiyya, or the lady of Ghamidiyya. And she said, here's the Ya Rasulullah, I've come with the baby. The Prophet said, who's going to take care of the baby if you die? Go breastfeed it. Take care of him. Again, for a year, 2 years, whatever. No one's calling her. No one's remembering her. She could have easily never showed back into the court of the Prophet. She herself then comes back and says, please, my child is grown now. I have breastfed it. Now I can give it to someone else. Purify me. Again, with much difficulty, the Prophet ordered the companions to carry out the penalty. As she was being punished, some of the blood came onto the clothes or the hands of one of the most illustrious generals of the Muslim history, of the companions of the Prophet. A man of that stature, you know, and he's got some blood of this criminal. So he made a remark about how dirty she was and about the blood that landed on her. And the Prophet, when he heard that, he scolded him and said, do you have any idea who this person is? That she repented to God such a repentance, لَقَدْ تَابَتْ تَوْبَةً. She repented such a repentance that if this repentance were to be spread by God, by Allah, over all the dwellers of Medina, every single one of you were to have been forgiven regardless of your sins. Because God has enjoyed and loved the way she came and repented. That if God wanted to spread that repentance over all of you, the worst amongst you, all of you would have been forgiven because of her. Don't get too haughty over your, things. The Prophet didn't say that, but I'm just trying to say, the Prophet was saying, don't you ever debase and look down upon this lady here. Because she is in the eyes of Allah possibly way closer than you are who are actually carrying out the punishment. Those are only 2 incidents that took place. Now you tell me, after understanding that, does that make sense now? That we just find any lady and she's walking outside, or any guy walking outside after curfew, and you throw him in the jail and then you pelt him and say you've committed fornication? Whoever's carrying that out, they are the ones who are performing injustice. They'll have to answer that in the court of Allah. We don't stand by that. We oppose that. That's wrong. That is outright wrong. But unfortunately, the Shariah and the Deen has been so misunderstood by people that everyone thinks that that's what it is. A person was caught stealing and was brought to the Prophet. Caught stealing like he didn't need the money or he didn't need anything. And so he had to face punishment for that. And the Prophet then began to, he got very emotional. And he said, I can't believe it that he's saying this, I can't believe it that one of the people from a member of my community, of my followers, his hand is being cut for some petty thing, for some money that he stole. Why did you have to bring him to me? Meaning that these laws are there as deterrents, so that you and I are afraid that, oh my God, we better not do these things. It's supposed to serve as a deterrent. Not that you go sit there and spying and searching and start putting video cameras everywhere to catch people doing stuff. Wallahi, I swear to God, that is not the purpose of that. It's supposed to just instill a level of fear that people will not cheat on their husbands and their wives, and people will not steal. And that's it. So here's a man who's being brought to the judge, the Prophet himself, and he's saying, why did you bring it to him? You should have just explained it to him and took him away. Ask him to, stop doing it. But once you brought him to court, it's kind of late. Do you understand? So that is the very small, minute part of the Sharia, which is the penal code, addresses these things. Now Islam the Sharia itself is a complete, any law students here? No. Is aspiring to be, inshallah, or already are law students, but definitely the Quran is a book of law as well. And I was just reading this very interesting article really nice. Here's about how Thomas Jefferson read the Quran by Kevin Hayes from the University of Central Oklahoma. And as a student of law, and at that time, he talks about reading the Quran in order to gain understanding and in order to incorporate things, because the Stamp Act and other type of things were really kind of bothering his conscience, and he wanted to actually go and search out the other sources of law. And so in this article, it talks about how Thomas Jefferson not only had a copy of the Quran, but he actually went and studied the Arabic language and made a reform in the laws of Virginia in order to include Oriental languages within the schooling system. So because he thought it was necessary for not only he, as a lawyer and as a politician and of course as a leader of the country, to understand the Quran, to learn the Arabic language, but for the other people as well. Not to necessarily believe in the Quran as a holy book, but at least to be able to enjoy and understand and benefit from all the beautiful and beneficial things that the Quran has to offer. Right? So, you understand? So that is something that Thomas Jefferson himself had. And that's what I would say. That's the students of law or not. This is something, the Quran is definitely something that we should study, and the Arabic language is something that we should try to learn. Before I answer some of these questions, I'd like to just complete my thought. I said that sources of law are four. One was the Quran, one was the prophetic sayings, hadith. And the other two, I'll just mention it because we don't have time to get into details, was ijma', which is the consensus of the scholars of the community. Scholars of the world. Religious scholars of the world and theologians, if they have a consensus on an issue, then that will also form a law in Sharia. And lastly is analytical reasoning. Qiyas. I don't have time to give examples of this, but I'm just telling you, if you are a student of law, you will enjoy fiqh so much, because it's just so similar to studying previous cases and looking at the issue of precedence. When a certain judge made a decision based on that, you can move forward, looking through the annals of decisions, deciphering difficult language. All of that stuff is what exactly Islamic theologians do, and this is what our profession is. This is what we've been taught to do, and this is what we do. A simple example: the Quran doesn't say marijuana or crack and cocaine is haram. It doesn't say that, but we as Muslims say it's haram. It's forbidden. How do we say that? Because the Quran, the verse I mentioned at the beginning says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu, O believers, innamal khamr. Verily, khamr and gambling and idolatry is all forbidden, right? It's part of shaitan's doing, so stay away from it. Khamr, simple translation is alcohol. But then you look at the background of this word, the etymology of this word. Khamr min al-mukhamara, alladhi yukhamiru al-aql. Khamr is the root word. It's derived from mukhamara, which is anything that clouds the conscious. Anything that messes with your mind. So now, based on this small little word in the Quran, which says wine and alcohol, for the era of the Arabs, nomadic Arabs of 1400 years ago, that was sufficient. Drinking, you can't drink wine and alcohol. They didn't have Budweiser at that time. But they didn't need to understand that, right? This is what it's saying. Drinking our Arabic wine is just not permissible. Nowadays, beautifully, using analytical reasoning, we can understand that your whole range of red wine to sherry and to Budweiser to all kinds of stuff, including other drugs like marijuana and crack cocaine, all of them, anything that messes with your mind and makes your thought process cloudy becomes haram, forbidden. Right? So that's the analytical reasoning, for example. That goes into things that credit cards. How did we say credit cards and paying late fees is haram? Is that mentioned in the Quran? No. But then you use analytical reasoning to derive from a precedence that is mentioned in the Holy Book or by the Prophet himself or by a consensus of scholars of the previous age. All right. So that is what Islamic law or is all derived from. And I'll answer a few questions. And of course, I've touched about a number of things. And so I'm sure a lot of you have a lot of questions. We'll see which ones we can address.
All right. Let's see. So we have a question about honor killings. I vaguely mentioned, yes, there is absolutely no basis for honor killings in Islam. And a father, mother, or brothers or sisters, whoever involved in that, all are murderers, first degree murder, and they can face the capital punishment for that, for killing their family members. And definitely that's a huge offense. Where does that come from? That comes from culture. That comes from that culture. Just like we have American culture that influences a lot of things that we do. We don't get some Muslims from across the world, they look at how we do certain things and be surprised, like, why'd you do that? Nothing as crazy as this maybe, or maybe there is, I don't know, to think about. I have to think about what things we do. But of course not in violent in this sense, but different things, you know what I mean? Different things of how we go about. That has to do with the culture that it comes from. Unfortunately, that is what's happening. You have this past year or 2 years, we saw so many incidents just in the Midwest, in Indiana and whatnot. A brother who comes in, so brutally stabs his own brother and his own mom and dad, and drags them outside, cracks the head on the basement floor, all kinds of stuff. Maybe even went to a church, but obviously the church didn't teach him how to do that. Didn't say to do that. In the fit of anger, if he quoted or he said, God, a lot of people say that God told me to kill. Muslims and non-Muslims, these serial killers and whatnot, they say there's a voice speaking to them, and some of our leaders say God speaks to them to invade countries. That's how it is. So you have a lot of psychopaths who say a lot of things, but that doesn't mean that actually the Quran teaches that, or the Shariah tells you to do honor killings. About the case about blowing up mosques. See, this is my number one way I talk to people who ask me. I always get, of course, get asked at the airport. Magically, I'm what they say, randomly selected, repeatedly, and I have the honor of actually being received at the airplane. I don't have to wait till I get outside. I got actually people waiting for me at the gate of the airplane. So, and I always like to share with you because people, it's surprising. We're like an Airbus 300 filled with 300 passengers or whatever, 400 passengers. We're coming off, and there'll be two cops standing there and checking everyone's passports. And when I'm behind, I'm like, hey, I'm here, man. All right, just leave these guys. Leave these guys. You're waiting for me. I'm here. Okay, let's go. And so they're like, oh, thank you. It's a normal routine. We got to go through. I'm like, yeah, it's fine. Let's get going. So I talked to them last time, and I was like, listen. They're like, we treat you like a VIP, don't we? I was like, that's exactly what I said. I said, I'm the VIP you've been waiting for, So. And it's the same set of questions. I said, don't you remember 2 months ago, a month ago I came? Actually, 2 weeks ago I came. You asked me the same questions. Don't we got computers? Don't you just look at the answers? I'm not going to keep on changing the date of birth of mine or my address. It's a simple things. But this is what you got to do as Muslims in this country. You have to go through that profiling and fine, whatever. But like at the end, they always ask me, so what do you have to say about terrorists? And you seem to be a really sensible, educated guy. You seem really level-headed, and we're pleased to meet you, and da-da-da-da. But what do you got to say about these wacko terrorists? What do you got to say about them? And I always tell them, I said, very valid question. The thing is that who should be angry? You all angry? You all angry? What's happening? That people are dying? Well, President Obama in his Ramadan iftar address, in his address, he addressed this point very beautifully, and he said the fact that the number one victims of terrorism in the name of Islam are Muslims. There is absolutely no comparison between the number of innocent Muslim children, women, men, not in bars and nightclubs, but in the mosque, in the masjid, in the state of prayer, who have been killed in this past 10 years. Compared to the innocent people who are working in offices or innocent people who are riding a bus. There's just no comparison. In a week, more Muslims are killed than probably in a year or two. Non-Muslims are killed. So we are the ones who are actually, unfortunately, getting the brunt of bulk of this whole terrorism thing. So don't you think we're angry? But not only are we getting hit so bad, on top of that, you are vilifying me. And you're vilifying all the rest of us whose children are dying. We go to prayer in Pakistan. You go to mosque, you don't know if you can come back alive. On a daily prayer, you can get just shot at Isha. When you go to evening prayer, someone might shoot you. So as much as you hate them, I hate them more. That's what I said. I hate them. I wish I could see these guys. Well, I mean, I don't know what's in their minds. Why would you go do something like this? Why would you? Why would you go kill innocent little kids, cute little kids praying? Why would you do that? So I don't know why they're doing that. I really have no answer to that. They're just wacko people. I just cannot comprehend their ideology. So I don't need to explain whether the Quran says about killing non-Muslims or non-Muslims. Definitely you can agree with me, right? That the Quran nowhere says that you're allowed to go kill children, in Muslim children performing the prayer in a mosque. Would the Quran say something like that? Obviously not. Just like it doesn't say that, it doesn't say go kill non-Muslims either. If there's a verse or two that you're going to make a big deal about, you're completely taken out of the context. You have no idea what you're talking about. You're just like that lady. You've seen something on Fox and you're like, oh, this is what it says, فَقْتُلُوا الْمُشْرِكِينَ حَيْثُ وَجَدتُّمُوهُمْ. This is what it means. You're completely taking that out of context. You have to study. Become a student of law and you'll understand. Don't become, just read a text message and then start passing judgments on Muslims and on the Quran. So I've got, unfortunately, nothing to say where they're coming from. May Allah, end this huge fitna and this chaos that's spread amongst us. As for the issue of rape, I actually don't know the full, don't recall what the laws are in Saudi or anywhere else. Someone has been saying these are the laws are. Definitely this would be unfair as a question asks that a woman needs to have 3 witnesses to prove it, and a man needs to have just 1 witness to disprove it. I'm unaware of that. I have I'm not in a position to comment on that because I didn't even know about that law that existed. The outset, of course, it looks unfair and seems not to make a lot of sense with all the other contextual, the textual evidence that comes to mind. And definitely, if a woman has been raped, the penetration and all those type of things do not apply. These are we're talking about specifically for fornication, adultery, not fornication, meaning after marriage. After marriage, the laws of death apply only for after marriage. I mean, even the description of what type of person, after seeing penetration, you can face a death penalty is so lengthy that many people just fall out right there as well. You get what I'm trying to say? What type of person is even eligible to face the death penalty? After even you've got 4 witnesses, it's so lengthy and so descriptive that many people just fall out of that category. So this law is definitely I'm not aware of, and maybe I will look into that. As far as I know, that's definitely what the Sharia does not require. Looking for that type of penetration for rape, or even 4 witnesses or 3 witnesses or whatnot. Lastly, someone asked, what is Sharia? Is simply to explain to someone who is unaware of it. Because all they're gonna think is honor killings. It's just, maybe you can just say the obligation component. The obligation component of a Muslim, what he's obligated to do to Allah, to the Prophet, to society, to his parents, to his children, to his neighbors, to his business partners. The obligation component and the entire structure of Islamic ethics. Entire structure of Islamic ethics and morals. The obligation component and the entire structure of Islamic ethics. That's what Sharia is. The etymology of it, remember, it's the path. It all comes from the water hole. All of us are going towards that water hole. We need that water in order to purify ourselves and to quench our thirst. And all of us are treading on there. There's no blowing up. There's no killing. None of that stuff. If there's a tiny bit of a penal code system that exists there, then we still have the capital punishment. We have a whole bunch of things that we do in this country in order to deter and to punish those who are offenders of the law. And so I hope that at least this is just food for thought that I have shared with you, and that if you are interested in learning more, then I'll mention to you a few things that may come in handy. You might want to take notes for that. All right. For example, specifically on the penal code. All right. I'm not talking about the complete Sharia. I'm just talking penal code. A book called by Muhammad Vahed, Vahed. Last name I'll make it real short. Vahed, Vahed. It's called Crime and Punishment: A Comparative Analysis Between Islamic Law and Western Law. Crime and Punishment: A Comparative Analysis Between Islamic Law and Western Law. And second one by Rudolf Peters, crime and punishment in Islamic law. Then we have Glenn, legal traditions of the world. Glenn, Glenn, legal traditions of the world. We have Amanat, 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 and okay, I'm sorry. Glenn, legal traditions of the world. Are you up? Did you get that? Did you get the previous ones? Then we have the fourth one is Amanat, Shariah, Islamic law in the contemporary context. All right, and something very contemporary for us. Al-Raba, Alrabaa, Al-Raba. Karen in Saudi Arabia. Karen in Saudi Arabia, living under Sharia. That's the title of the book. Karen in Saudi Arabia, living under Sharia, written by Al-Raba. And the last book here is Baleva, Baleva, Common Law and Sharia in Nigeria. And I will just there's many articles that you can read, but I'll just give you just one that I particularly liked. This is by Boisard, Boisard, Boisard. You can Google it. It's available for free, the PDF. On the probable influence of Islam, on Western public and international law. Western public and actually the whole jury system. I don't know if you read about that. The jury system is possibly, there's a theory that came from the Malikis who ruled Sicily, Muslims who practiced the Maliki fiqh in Sicily. That's where the whole jury system came about. So there's a lot of actual things that we in America practice today in our judicial legal system that possibly have roots in the Islamic legal tradition. So I hope those few thoughts and ideas I shared with you were beneficial. If anything was beneficial, it was indeed from Allah. If anything I said was wrong or misrepresented Islam, it was from myself and from shaitan. May Allah forgive me. And thank you so much for being a beautiful audience. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah khair, Mufti Azeem, for coming out tonight. I hope we all learned from this very beneficial talk. Tomorrow we have an event. It's called Social Justice in Islam, pretty much. It's at 5:30 by Edmund Arroyo. It's going to be in Simpson Multipurpose Room. We have shirts in the back that we're selling. It's the shirt that I'm wearing right now. It's our IAW shirts. They're $10 each. They're in the back. We're trying to sell them off this week.
What about refreshments? They're all done, I think so, huh?
Yeah, that was the next announcement. Hopefully there's still refreshments outside. And there's a bunch of pamphlets and there's some Qur'ans if you're interested in picking up any of those. Those are all outside. Besides that, hope to see you guys all tomorrow, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.